Welcome to Jump Shots from the Goal Line. I'm your host, Jonathan Dugan, joined by my wonderful co-host, John Henningsen. And guess who's freaking back, ladies and gentlemen? The man, the myth, the legend, the freaking diamond hands, Ben Crownover. It is college football season, and it ain't going to be college football season on Jump Shots from the Goal Line without the man himself. Ben, welcome back, dude. We missed you.
It was it was a nice little break from gambling, but my 16 weeks of degeneracy starts now. I got big plans this year with my investments, so I'm super pumped.
Yeah, I have to know what's like on the dream wish list this year because last year is the smoker. You got it.
Yeah.
And also don't lie to the audience. We know that you were gambling on hockey for at least another like 30 weeks. So
Yeah, I mean, but that's like one big play a night. So it's not the same level of if I'm doing, 3 units on the Leafs. That's the only thing I'm playing that night. So it's way different than what you guys get to experience, where it's like, all right, I got 27 picks. I'm just glued in front of the TV, and my children are screaming and running around all like beside me, and I'm just like I want to watch Tango. And I'm like, nope, not happening. We got Notre Dame and Navy on today, so it's kind of that's how my life is for the next significant portion of time, and then hockey it does slow down, but I still care.
nice, dude. Well, you know what? Maybe some of those winnings can get your kids a new TV, perhaps. Maybe that's the move.
I get the Buffalo Wild Wings set up over there or something like that. It's
Yeah, dude.
7 TVs. They can have Frozen on one, Cars on another, and then I got like 6 college football games.
Well, dude, I'm glad that we have you on, kind of a son of Pennsylvania because good old Henny here just visited the homeland of Ben. Not necessarily the city, but at least the state. Henny, how was it, dude? How was good old Allentown?
I mean, look, Allentown's it's a place, and no, and honestly, like I will say, everybody in Allentown, great people, like genuinely, like a bunch of truly endearing people. I enjoyed my time in Allentown. I do think the city's going through like a bit of a tough time right now, which has nothing to do with it's not a reflection on anybody there. So just think it is what it is. But I will tell you, just from like the sports standpoint, what was going on is I didn't spend a lot of time getting into talk sports. I'm in a role that is probably like, if not equally, probably predominantly dominated by women. So there's definitely not a lot of Penn State talk. But I spent a lot of time going up and down from the 14th floor. Ben, I'm sure you're familiar, probably an office you've seen before. And 14 to 2 is a long way if you just happen to bring up who we are. And so plenty of like Drew Allard talk, plenty of this kid in Canton. I don't have a good Allentown accent, unfortunately. Don't quite have a grip on it. It's sort of got a Midwestern vibe, but with like a
It's
touch of East Coast. So it's an interesting place, and you can probably share. But I mean, Penn State's still there, and they were very excited to hear that there's a Penn State, bar, Penn State vibe here in Tucson. You can find Penn State fans here, so no one's afraid to do a push up for a Nittany Lion out here. Certainly that does exist. Although, as you can see, I'm still all Arizona. We'll see if we get a drop in from the dog, who's also willing to bear down today. She's in the house. So, but no, it was a great time in Allentown. All really great people, like a really good vibe. Had a great time out there. But yeah, Ben, if you want, I mean, feel free to explain to me what exactly is going on out there, because it is an interesting
that
mix. I get hard to put a pin on it.
I don't claim them because they're typically Eagles fans as well as Penn State fans. So like they're not
For
my
sure.
Mhm.
people. They're like the third cousin you see like once a
People.
year. The accent's kind of like Philly mixed with Alabama a tiny bit. Um,
Mm.
it depends on the person you're talking to, because if they're from Philly, they're going to sound different. A lot of talk about Johns. Um, you know, I don't know if you ran into that at all, but like, hey, pass me that John, etc. Like they'll take some of that Philly stuff, but then add in some random Maryland and all those different things. But I don't claim them as my own people. They are not Central PA. They are not Pittsburgh. They're their own breed, and I think a big part of that is you got to be kind of messed up to be an Eagles fan. Like I don't get that personally, but
I was gonna say, dude, all those Allentown transplants, all the Penn Staters, they all probably work with us. So if you guys are
A lot of them
listening,
do.
we're talking about you right now. So heck yeah, man. Well, I'm glad that your trip was good, Henny. At least you got to go see a little slice of Americana out there. Um, but guys, I figured we would just jump into it, right? Because college football started today. We had week 0 games. Notre Dame played Navy in Dublin, which was pretty cool for me because I was there, what, 2-3 weeks ago. Saw Joe Montana do the exact same Guinness pour that I did in the exact same spot. Who's to say who did it better? Probably me, but that was a cool thing. The game itself was not as cool though. That was a beatdown.
I was sweating it a bit. I had
But it was
the
college
under.
football.
It was college football. It was all that mattered. That was a big time sad field goal to end the game. They're like, all right, we didn't get shut out. It was. I'm so glad they went for it. But yeah, that was instead of going for a touchdown because I was very nervous. But it was football. It was back. It was perfect.
What was the line for that one, Ben?
Opened at
20 and a
50
half.
and a half, and the line was 20 and a half for the over under 50 and a half. The line was 20 and a half. By the way, I just officially am 4-0 on week 0 picks. Hawaii Rainbow Warriors 28, Vanderbilt Commodores 35. So I'm
Wow.
I'm on it already. 4-0.
Where did you finish last year with your picks, dude? It was like 60%, wasn't it?
It might have been a little touch higher. I'm going to track it this year because I do actually want to know my exact percentage. But it was definitely north of 60, but I don't know if it got to the 70 range or not.
Well, it got you a new smoker, so that's all that really matters. Um, but yeah, like Henny said, it was college football. There were a lot of games played today. I personally, the only one I really watched was the USC San Jose State game. Caleb Williams is still very good. He threw that
USC's
one
defense
75-yard bomb.
is still very bad, by the
Yeah.
way.
Hey,
So
Alex Grinch. Yeah. Still not doing the damn thing. Um, but the offense, Dorian Singer, former Cat, Henny, he did grab a tutty. So that was a weird sight to see. I don't know if you guys watched that game.
it was
Yeah, I don't know if that counts, but I mean, I'm still wearing the U of A gear. It's a touchdown for everyone. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just say, and then Ben, you can drop in with whatever. But I mean, I'll just say, I'm just so happy college football's back. I mean, I know we did this for
Yes.
like a full month last year, but like we have limited time because of just our windows. Like I was, chasing a wedding. You were in Ireland, pretending to be a Notre Dame fan, masquerading as Joe Montana. Apparently, congratulations on your completion percentage on Guinness pours. But it was very exciting today. I mean, nothing better than getting the Twitter fired back up, dropping one college football tweet, and immediately getting 10,000 more responses than we've had all year quietly on everything else. So shout out to everyone who's back and is exactly ready as I am, except for to the one guy, of course, who's just had to be a sour puss. But that's going to happen with Twitter. We all know the game, so no worries, buddy. If you're upset that I didn't also add to my joke that I found ESPNU 30 seconds later. My bad. Sorry that you weren't in on the joke. Enjoy your Formula One and your NASCAR and the rest of your creepy tweets.
I'm just happy.
But we're just so happy to have the engagement and have college football back.
Yes.
Even if you're going to be a creep, send them weird messages. I laugh just as hard as all of those as I do at all the supportive ones. So just stoked to have college football back, man. We got to do this for like a full month last year. We had all this engagement rolling up into it. And now we just get to our open week 0 with none other than Ben Crownover, who's going to bet the entire board, baby. So we're back. I mean, we're just fully in it, and I couldn't be happier, man. So like, Ben, you can take the momentum from there, but I couldn't be happy. Also, I learned this week that you're supposed to show your hands just to make people trust you on TV and on camera. So just a reminder, we're safe here. We're safe here. You can't see us on Twitter like that, but you can definitely see us on camera. Ben, roll with it from there, man. I'm just juiced for college football, and so glad to have the gang back together.
This is going to be a really interesting year for so many different reasons. Like, one, I wasn't swayed by somebody telling me TCU was, not that good, and that cost me like for weeks and weeks and weeks. That
it's entire Chargers offense now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it is.
But it was
which they're playing right now. So
They're probably going to get injured or something. I don't know. Might be usual stuff, but it's just this is the best time of year. I'm so excited for the Big Ten. I didn't get to talk to you guys about the death of the Pac-12, but like that's kind of cool for me, sad for you. I There's a lot of things happening, and I'm just honored to be part of one of the two power conferences. Personally, myself, I play for Penn State, obviously, but it's a big, it's a very. This is like the last
We
year,
are.
right? This is the last year of traditional, relatively common sense conference alignments, and we don't necessarily have like the typical favorites. Because if you're going to look at me and tell me USC is going to do anything, they just had 28 dropped on them by San Jose State. So, um, other than Caleb Williams, I'm not really like sold on like, hey, this team's going to be absolutely incredible. Um, we can when we go through like some of the Big Ten teams, I'm like, I will admit that Michigan is good, but for the most part, it is a pretty wide open year with a lot of new starting quarterbacks. And week 0 is done in the books. We get rid of all the stupid like that's the only time I'll probably watch UMass, New Mexico State. Um, but it's we're live. We're ready. We're ready to go, and it's going to be an awesome year. I'm very excited. This is the most optimistic I've ever been about college football, by the
Listen,
way,
dude.
in my entire life. I think if you thought I was delusional last year, I will be 3 times as delusional
We
this
did.
year. So I can't wait. Penn State covered, by the way, I
Oh,
think in 11 of 12 games. So whatever. Just saying, it wasn't completely delusional.
Listen, first of all, we won't have any Minutemen like just slander on this podcast because that is Dr. Blitz's team, and he took basically half of our roster with him. Isaiah Rutherford had a 55-yard interception return tonight. Never did that at U of A. I can fully confirm that. And then SC
another win.
also took another common
Another,
Henny W.
another common U of A dub. I mean, where aren't the Wildcats bearing down? Nationwide coming at you.
Dude, and then like SC, you talk about their defense being bad. I just want to let you know that one of their starting corners was our starting corner last year, and one of their starting defensive linemen was also one of our starting defensive linemen last year. So if SC fans, if you want to take any or place any kind of blame on the defense, we're here for it. Okay, like we gave you guys our
I think you
scrubs,
can blame
so we
Lincoln
get it. We
Riley.
we watch them do the same things here in Tucson.
It's all Lincoln Riley's fault. This is what
Yeah,
he
definitely.
does. He hates defense. They never practice tackling. They don't do anything.
His whole like his weird confidence in Alex Grinch just coming back to bite him because if last year was any indication of what that man can do on when he's calling defenses, he's shown it again this year. So it's something. I'll leave it at that. But yeah, dude, the Big Ten. I'm glad you brought it up. We had Chase Beiersdorf on last week, and we kind of gave him a little bit of a hard time. Obviously, with Henny being my co-host, that was bound to happen. And he seems to think that the Big Ten is going to be just a supremely great conference this year. He thinks that SC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington are going to have a really tough time next year. Give me your thoughts, dude, on this whole merger. Well, not even merger, just theft. What do you take from it?
You talking about the end result of the alliance? How that really worked out super well.
Yes.
However
That
you
was
want to
some
talk
Game of
about it.
Thrones stuff, dude. I'll tell you what. Like we had a little meeting in the garden. We talked about how we are going to form an alliance and we would steal 4 of your teams. I'm I think it won't change much in terms of like who the heavy hitters are. I feel bad for like teams like Northwestern, Indiana, um, a lot of those like the shitty teams in the Big Ten. No other way to put it, because they're going to be even worse. Obviously, like if I was to stack rank them in terms of like future potential, I'd say USC slots into like 3A or 3B. Oregon probably like 4A or 4B, depending on where you put some of the other teams. I don't expect UCLA to do much without Dorian Thompson Robinson. And Washington, I don't like them just for various like stupid reasons related to previous coworkers who were like super into them. But like, I think overall, like,
Mm.
it's really only going to should give the Big Ten, hopefully like 4 or 5 playoff teams in the 12-team expanded format next year. And like for me, like I'm pumped because I feel like Penn State's going to be in there every year now. Whereas like I know that it's not super likely with 4 teams when I have to go like you got Ohio State and Michigan in front of you because the divisions were really well aligned. It's the Big Ten is going to be probably like 7 to 8 really good teams and then 10 really crappy or middle moving forward. Yeah, exactly.
So
It's like the Live Tour.
And I just want to jump in, and I want to jump in because this is like where I think this is more me and Chase left the conversation. And Chase, feel free to jump in our comments and tell me I'm an a-hole if I'm wrong here or if I've misstepped. But I think Ben, what you're saying, and I think this is kind of like mirrors some of the reality of what I was trying to share, is that the reality of the Big Ten is that it's been a 2-team conference, and essentially it was a 1-team conference for a very long time in terms of who was ultimately, and I understand you're gonna, just paddle hard, buddy, like for your team, but ultimately it's been Ohio State's conference. It is now turned into a shared conference between Ohio State and Michigan, and then there are other teams that are fleeting and fighting. What I find to be, or what I expect to be true, is that now everybody who falls under that 1A and 1B is in a fight with USC, Washington, Oregon. I think those schools are going to slot right in and be every bit as problematic year after year. Now, it might turn out that, Penn State has a good year this year, or maybe it's the following year and they slot into that kind of 2B spot, or even maybe they find themselves in a 1B spot. I'm not saying that's not possible with any of these teams, but I think Washington, Oregon, and USC are going to be those teams that find themselves in that pecking order. And I think the real losers here in the Big Ten, although they might be winners just because of expansion into the playoff system, maybe not because of actual expansion of the conference, is that some of those teams are going to, benefit from that perspective. But I don't think they're really going to benefit from adding these Pac-12 schools that they perceive as lesser powers. I think them getting Big Ten money and then considering the momentum that they have going into this year with top 10 programs, at least leading into the year, I think is very problematic for Nebraska. Name the team after that, and you can better tell me who's aligned there. And I think I'm sure you're thinking hey, yeah, I think Penn State can hold their own, and I wouldn't argue with that. I just think that Penn State's going to find themselves in that position where are they battling with USC? Are they battling with Washington? Is it Oregon this year? And I kind of see that's where the fight is, and then likely that Ohio State ultimately wins out in this. It's maybe with Harbaugh and Michigan. We'll see where that goes after this year. Maybe he decides to take suspension. Maybe he passes on a suspension. Maybe he kind of double birds a suspension. Maybe he just leaves for the NFL. I don't really know what Michigan holds long term, but I think it's going to be really interesting in terms of I just don't buy the idea that this is really going to be easy for the Big Ten. Oh, cool, we're bringing these Pac-12 schools, we'll just push them to the bottom. I just don't find that to be the case, although I do think there's a lot of really interesting coaches, and no doubt the Big Ten is going to be a power. I mean, they've added some really big-name coaches. They continue to grow and expand and be strong. So I'm not also saying that the Pac-12 is going to come in and roll these teams. I just think there's much more of a conversation to be had than what
it depends on how you want to look at
some Big Ten folks are willing to have.
What would define success, right? And to me, it's is the Big Ten champ, right? The team that wins the national championship. There hasn't been a national champion in college football who had less than 50% of their team as 4- and 5-star recruits. Currently, only 3 teams have that in the Big Ten: Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State. And if you look at the 4 additions, only 2 of those teams have that as well, which would be Oregon and USC. So you're really looking at those 5 should consistently be kind of battling it out. And I don't know if Ohio State continues to do, where they say at the top they do have 5 5-star recruits for the 2024 cycle already, which makes me so pumped. I get really excited about Ryan Day and his stupid spray painted on hair. Never had a gray hair in his life, piece of shit, whatever. But I think there's really only going to be really.
Yes, there it is.
Welcome home, baby.
I think there's only going to be 5
college football
really
where opinions reign supreme.
18 total conference that are actually nationally relevant. Maybe you get Washington from here or there. I mean, obviously they're going to be good this year with Michael Penix, but like I think for the most part, they're going to be sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth in the pecking order. You really only have those 5 teams that consistently are 50% plus 4 and 5 star players. So that's kind of how I look at it. I think we're saying the same thing, maybe. I'm more, I'll beat the drum for Penn State over and over again that they are right on the cusp of doing big things.
I like that. Now, I have a question actually for you, Henny. Like, I was thinking about this earlier today. Like, with Oregon moving to the Big Ten, like, they've been such a traditional, like, powerhouse for the past, 10, 15 years in the pack. But we are pretty far removed from, like, the glory days of, like, Chip Kelly, Mariota, all them. Do you think this move helps Oregon in terms of, like, recruiting and, like, competing? Or do you think that I kind of sense maybe a regression coming here pretty soon because they're not going to finish probably like top of the conference year over year, and truthfully, like the recruiting hasn't been what it once was. It's still good, but it's not what it once was.
So I'm weirdly optimistic about Washington and kind of thinking that they've been a bit of a sleeping giant this entire time. So there's part of me that just thinks that there's a fit for Washington that kind of makes sense in the Big Ten. So like there's just a part of me that thinks that Washington might be a sneaky winner in all of this. Is they like one, I think DeBoer is like a really great coach, like a really sharp coach at least. And like there's still a lot to be proven and we don't really know. It's all very new with him as well. But I think they've had traditionally big bodies there. And they have a good recruiting base just right at home. And I think there's something about a bunch of people in the Big Ten going to a lake to tailgate that just makes sense. So I think there's a lot of things that just fit here for Washington. So I wouldn't be surprised if the sort of regression we see from Oregon just comes at the benefit of Washington. But what I think is just going to be the reality is that a couple of these teams are going to benefit. I don't know exactly who and when, and it might just be as simple as coaching. And I think, as Ben's talking about Penn State right now, right? He's beating the drum because James Franklin has been very good at recruiting, and he has brought in recruits, and there's no doubt that he's done a very good job at that. And there's always going to be ebbs and flows with, teams in that regard. So I see it from both perspectives, right? Like I also don't expect like I think it was Ben is alluding to as well. And I think we are speaking the same language that I don't think the Pac-12 teams are going to go in there and just roll over all these Big Ten teams either. I've always thought that like Power 5 schools, given the same resources, are going to be very close and very similar. And there's going to be tough games on the road wherever they land. Let's just do it, and we'll just bring up Iowa, right? Like they have figured this Big Ten thing out, and they're annoying, and they're a thorn in everybody's side, and we all hate them for it. Nobody likes them. That much is clear. But they are a problem, and I do think like some of these Pac-12 schools can be that. Now, I think the Pac-12 schools are going to benefit from not seeing a team like Utah, much like a Big Ten school would love to never play Iowa again. Those are the kinds of schools that are just physical brand of football that's annoying. You don't want to see them on your schedule. So I just think a couple of teams are going to benefit. I don't know that Oregon's in a bad place. If Lanning's really as good as he was at Georgia and like can continue to be, and if he can put together recruits, then hey, this starts to make a lot of sense for them too. And I think that they could very much fit in because I don't think Dan Lanning left Georgia thinking like I'm afraid to go play in the Big Ten or the Pac-12 or wherever he thought he was going to land. So I just think that there's just a lot to be played out, and as resources become more equal and as these teams get welcomed into these conferences, that we're just going to see that play out, which is why, in the same token, I'm very excited to see a school like Arizona be in the Big 12, get a little money, get a little more resources, get a little more perspective or, garner more national attention. Like, I think those things benefit and kind of raise all ships or what have you. So I think college football is just going to be awesome going forward. I don't think anything that really happened, as sad as it is, and I do love all the traditional stuff, I think it's just very exciting, man. Like, it's just, we're in a really good place. I think I'm stoked to see this. And like, and I love that for no reason at all, I'm somewhat invested in those Pac-12 schools, like playing well against the Big Ten schools, and every bit of that trash talk is going to happen in our little group chat. And I know that, and I love that. Like, I'm excited for it. Like, and it could be year to year. And like, I'm sure Ben's going to have plenty of laughs at our expense and hopefully vice versa. But, at the end of the day, he's going to root for Penn State, and I'm really only rooting for Arizona, and everything else in between is just something that we're going to make fun of on Twitter.
Yeah. Now, I have a question kind of for both of you then. Like, Henny, you kind of already answered it with your last answer, but like and Ben, you kind of already answered it too, but like the future of college football, right? Like with all the moving parts, the Big 12 is huge now. The Big 10 is massive. The SEC hasn't taken anybody yet, but they're probably going to end up with like what, Florida State, Clemson. Um, what do we think the future of college football looks like? You know what I mean? Like we're so used to the traditional Power Five, and now it's about to be maybe Power Three, more likely Power Two.
I think it'll be power 3.5 until the ACC falls apart. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and honestly, like it doesn't matter to me if it's 2, 3, 4, whatever it is. Like I just want to see good matchups because it sucks watching Ohio State play Northwestern. It sucks watching Clemson play Duke. Like that's not fun. I would much rather see like more consistent good matchups on a weekly basis outside of like, 3 or 4 big ones that existed in like the previous template. I don't know. Like I will be very excited for, USC playing in Iowa at night because I love watching upsets. And like I think we'll get a lot of opportunities for that stuff. But the scheduling is going to be the weirdest thing about it because like, all I've known for the last like what 6 years or whatever that the Big Ten's been in this like random like divisions side of things was like the West had it
Mm-hmm.
so easy, and the
Yeah.
East or legends and leaders, whatever you want to call it, had that like it was like all right, well you got to go through Ohio State or Michigan. Like
We
next year,
definitely
Penn
want to call
State
it legends
does
and
not
leaders, by the way.
play.
We don't want to call it anything but that.
Yeah,
East and West is no fun. Legends and leaders was so pompous. We only want to call it that from my perspective, just to be clear. But carry on, and I think your
Dear
point's
God.
landing home. And sorry about the dog.
Yeah.
I'm really shaking my head at the dog and not
Well,
you. What you're saying makes sense.
You're good. It's gonna be really interesting though because like you could have USC play literally none of the good teams in the Big Ten in 3 years, right? Like Lincoln Riley is undefeated, and then he plays a real team in the Big Ten championship and gets his ass kicked. But like the scheduling, when you have that many teams, like you just might not play a good team that year and you're going to have a great season. Like I think we'll see a lot more of like, 7-1, 8-0 matchups of teams you're like, "Oh, I can't believe Minnesota is undefeated right now." And then it's like they just get destroyed by like UCLA or something like that. It's going to be really weird,
Yeah.
but that's like people don't talk about it enough. Like the scheduling piece of this is going to be really weird when you have that many teams because you just won't have the traditional matchups that we've been used to for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I was
Henny,
gonna
how
say,
about
I'm like,
you?
honestly, I just passed to you, Duke. I mean, I think what Ben said is pretty accurate, and I think we also just kind of don't know, right? I think it is going to come down to when the ACC falls apart. The part that's really weird is that it just seems like ultimately we're going to like end back up in the same space we were in because as they expand it, we're still going to just break
Yeah.
it down into regions, and then we're just going to call the conferences
Mhm.
something different. They're going to have whatever TV alliances that they have, and I mean, I just don't know. Like, it's just weird territory. And then I think we act like it's very different, but then at the same time, like, I'm sure there's like some, sign up at Penn State of some bowl game that just doesn't exist anymore. And, I've seen it in all the stadiums in the Pac-12 where they've, they were in a salad bowl, they were in the WAC conference, they were doing this thing or doing that thing. And the salad bowl, by the way, is just like the funniest one to me. But whatever it is, it's just this is what college football is. It always moves, it always changes. And then I think Dugan, as you and I have talked about, and we'll probably continue to talk about, from like an Arizona perspective, like, hey, like we play football and it's fun, and we like to be that upset team, and we like to have that night game and beat an undefeated UCLA or USC when it matters, or take out an Oregon quarterback or three and ruin their season, right? And exactly what games I'm talking about. But the reality is we just want to play college basketball, and I can't wait to get, Kansas and Fog Allen, and just go nuts. Like, we want to play Big 12 basketball games, and then at that point talk about how the Big 12 hasn't won a national championship in 1,000 years. So, like, we can't wait to get to that part.
Yeah.
Like, and we're going to let Ben, kind of throw some stuff at us. We'll take the tomato to the head. But then we get to basketball season, we're going to chuck him right back. He won't show up for basketball season, obviously. He'll be talking about hockey
No,
or, we
God,
got to
no.
dunk pucks, we got to chase pucks, and all that stuff. And I love him for it. But like that's the beauty of all this college football stuff, or just college sports in general, is that we all just get to play all these games how we want to play them, and that's the beauty of it. Like no one's going to be the best at everything in college sports. So I don't know, Dugan, why don't you tell us what's going on?
Yeah, dude. I mean, I kind of agree with every point that you guys made, right? Like, definitely it's going to be really regionally based and like kind of division based. It's all going to be kind of like the same, just with some new matchups, maybe some new rivalries popping up. That'll be fun, right? Like, we've already kind of made some rivalries with like Houston and like TCU and stuff through basketball. So I want to see how those things shake out. And then I think like USC already has kind of a little pseudo rivalry with some Big Ten schools through like proxy with Notre Dame, and Oregon and Ohio State kind of have a thing going because they're just taking blows from each other. So it'll be fun for sure. I'm excited for it. Like I cannot wait for Arizona, who I just realized is pretty much the Iowa of our division, right? Like maybe it's not the prettiest football, but we're gonna upset somebody. I'm excited for us to play some fun teams. Go to Baylor, go to Houston, go to Kansas State. I mean, I'm not going to go to Kansas State. You're not going to catch me in Kansas, but it'll be fun to watch on TV because we're not going to be playing at 8 o'clock anymore Pacific time. So that's cool. I do kind of want to get Ben, because you're such a huge college football fan. Like, I know you're a Big Ten guy, but with the moves the Big 12 has made, do you think that they're going to probably be a power conference? Like, do you see some nice matchups now?
You can be
No.
honest. Yeah, I was like, you can be
Good
honest. Like we
matchups.
want you to be honest. So you say what's in your heart, buddy.
Don't get me wrong. I love betting Big 12, but I never have really looked at the best teams that we've seen in the last like 10 years have been Lincoln Riley's teams. And the moment they got into the playoffs, what happens? They didn't play defense and they just fell apart. TCU was
Mm-hmm.
kind of the anomaly last year, but I don't expect that to be the norm moving forward. I love watching the games. They are good matchups. I don't think it necessarily makes them a better football conference, the moves that have happened, because obviously you lose Oklahoma and Texas. Like it, it's not going to make you a stronger football conference, but like basketball wise, you guys are going to be the sickest basketball conference that exists. The matchups, like give me Baylor, Arizona any night of the week. I will have money on it, but I'm not sure I'm gonna sit there and be like, yeah, this makes them a better, like, more powerful. Like you guys are probably the best basketball conference now moving forward. Like there's some cool stuff like on that side, but from a football side, I don't know. I just don't see it.
So
Ben, we do have UCF.
wait,
Just
that's national
letting you
champion.
know. So,
Acknowledge it and respect it.
yeah.
They printed the
Undefeated.
trophy.
I do.
Like I think it was on might have been a certificate, but whatever. But I am curious. With that said, it's probably a good way to take it to a national scope. And then I'm just curious, like Texas and Oklahoma, if that matters, do you believe in Texas? And I don't even think it's really a question about Oklahoma this year. I mean, we can talk about them if you think they're relevant, but there is definitely some national talk about Texas. Big surprise, shock. We all believe in Texas again.
They're back.
All it took was the turn of the calendar, and we're all back in on Texas. Yep, Dugan, horns down. Yeah, but ultimately, I mean, do you believe in Texas again? Because what I would guess I would push back on a little bit there is if you don't believe in Texas, then why don't you believe in Utah, and how is the conference not better?
So I believe in Utah, but in terms of, by the way, like Utah is awesome. I got to go to the Rose Bowl, see us kick their ass. It was awesome. But no, Utah, I do respect as a football like school. Texas, I don't trust because Texas has been back for the last 15 years and hasn't actually been back ever. Quinn Ewers cut his mullet.
They have a Manning
But
now,
Quinn
dude.
Ewers cut his mullet. They apparently don't expect Arch Manning to need to play. I do think Quinn Ewers is, in theory, like better and more improved than he was last year. But like what I saw from the games of him, like I'll be honest, I don't follow their spring practice like updates as much as I do other schools. But like the quarterback I saw last year was wildly inconsistent for a, number one overall recruit. Like until I see him actually do it, like I think he's going to get destroyed playing the SEC because, he was struggling. I mean, he did well against Alabama. That was a down Alabama team. And then that was really Hudson Card, I would say that really carried that team to almost beating Alabama. But like the overall, like Texas is just not, they will always be back and then they're actually not back. Like they might have 9 wins, but that's not how they define back. And I don't think that's how most of us define back. Like until they're 11-1, they're not back. And I don't see them ever being 11-1 in the SEC, truthfully.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, interesting. I think they do have some real momentum behind them. I agree with Henny. Like, getting Arch Manning, getting Ewers from the transfer window. I mean, Texas is Texas, dude. I think it honestly just depends on how realistic their athletic department is and the coach that's running the show. So with Sarkisian, who knows? Like it's gonna be
He's an
a wild,
asshole.
wild ride. I think they're gonna get their shit stomped in. Yeah, I think they're gonna get their shit stomped in for at least a couple years in the SEC, and he'll be reaching for that bottle here pretty quick. Those are my thoughts. I had to. I'm sorry.
Shots.
And yeah, Oklahoma. Oklahoma, I have no faith in at all. Like that was the Lincoln Riley show. They replaced him with Venables, and Venables showed last year that he has no idea how to actually run a team. So I think they're going to regress hugely. And I think honestly, Utah like doesn't have the. But yeah, I think it works out honestly more for like Utah. I think Utah at this point of the game is probably just as good as Oklahoma is leaving the Big 12 anyway. I think Utah is super strong. Defense is great. They get all the Simones in the world. So I think Utah could honestly kind of wreck shop in the Big 12. But with that said, let's move on. All right, let's move on to some Big 10 talk for this season because we got the tried and true master of it all in front of us here. Ben, what are we thinking, dude?
Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting year in the Big Ten. There's only three returning starting quarterbacks, and I say three loosely, because one of them started 6 games versus the other guy like that was on the team starting 5. So you got Talia Tagovailoa, you got McCarthy for Michigan, and then you got Wimsat from Rutgers. So those are our returning starting quarterbacks. Everybody else is like brand new, and there's a lot of transfers that are coming in. So you got McNamara, who was playing for Michigan, now going to be the Iowa starting quarterback. You got Tanner Mordecai from SMU, the darling of my year last year. Incredibly talented dude. Like they finally actually have a quarterback in Wisconsin, so I think they actually have a really good chance to kind of do some really impressive things. Jeff Sims is now the starting quarterback for Nebraska, and I think I remember us talking about this last year. Whenever Georgia Tech played Clemson, we said, "Wow, that quarterback on Georgia Tech is the only good player they have." Well, he's gone now, and now he's starting for Nebraska. You got the quarterback from Cincinnati is now the quarterback for Northwestern. Not that they're going to be any good, but just so you have
We need
that.
a
You
coach.
got Hudson Card. Yeah, that might help. Well, that's why you don't haze people, Hudson Card, who we talked about already a little bit, who almost beat Alabama, is now Purdue's starting quarterback. And then we have, I think they just named him the starting quarterback for Illinois, is Altmaier from Ole Miss. Other than that, though, you got Kyle McCord for Ohio State, who at least isn't a transfer, but he's only had one career start. Drew Alar, no true career starts. I also forgot to mention Taven Jackson for Indiana from Tennessee. Noah Kim, 0 starts for Michigan State. Like there's literally almost no returning experience at quarterback, which is why this thing is basically, in my opinion, a 3-team race. There'll be 6 teams that are really relevant, which I'm sure you guys can kind of figure out who those are. And it's really only because of the West schedule, but we got Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and Maryland in the East, and then you have Wisconsin and Iowa in the West. That's really how this thing is going to shake out. By the way, if you're looking for a future pick, I am in on both the Iowa and Wisconsin over. The Iowa one pays a little bit better. It's at a plus 110. It's 8.5. Wisconsin was at 8.5 as of last week. It might have moved to 9 because I was just at the point of tipping the whole way up, which actually would probably be better and give you a little bit better odds. But the whole thing here is that, like, obviously Michigan is like is the favorite. I think everybody knows that. Kind of coming in, like, they didn't really lose anybody. They have a very good NIL structure in place that kept guys playing for them that in theory would have gone to the NFL. They return, not in my opinion, but in the opinion of many, the best running back tandem in the country, in Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. They have J.J. McCarthy. They have pretty much everybody you could want back. And this is supposed to be John Harbaugh's best team, top to bottom, that he's ever had. That being said, maybe he goes to the NFL next year. But overall, Michigan is the clear-cut favorite based off what they've done. And J.J. McCarthy was in his first year starting last year, and they realistically should have beat TCU and been in the national championship. Ohio State, though, I think is potentially third in the East because of who they lost and where they lost those players. So obviously breaking in a new quarterback, I'm not going to sit here and tell you Kyle McCord is a bum. He was a top 50 recruit. The dude's going to be good. Ohio State's been churning out quarterbacks to the NFL for the last, honestly, like 12 years, it feels like. But they lost a ton of dudes on the offensive line. Granted, they have the best receiver room in the country. They have, realistically, nobody knows about him yet, but Julian Fleming was like the 4th receiver on that team last year. He was the 5th overall prospect 2 years ago, and expect him to step up. If he's not a significant contributor this year, he will be next year, and probably another first-round draft pick for Ohio State. They lost both starting tackles, which is not good when you look at kind of some of the matchups that they're going to face. They have Brian Hartline calling plays now, which is kind of interesting. But Jim Knowles kind of has to prove it this year because last year their defense looked great, except for when they played real teams. They averaged like 20 points per game, which sounds great. But then you look at the Maryland game, the Michigan game, the Penn State game, and Georgia, and I think one other team, it's escaping me right now. They were like 37 points allowed on average. So, like, they look decent, but it's really they have JT Tumaloa, or however you say his name, as a defensive end, and then they have pretty strong linebackers. But the defense is a big question mark, and losing those offensive linemen in a time where you're bringing in a new quarterback makes me think that they probably go 10-2 this year instead of going 11-1 or 12-0. I don't like the 10.5 over under for them personally. Mm-hmm. The reason why I think Penn State is number 2 in this conversation is because Penn State has the best defensive line in the Big Ten. They led the country in pressures last year, and they only lost a very small percentage of that production. If you look at everything else they have going on defense, like, they lost their secondary, but their strength is Ohio State's potential weakness. A lot of people are saying Penn State beats Ohio State, Michigan beats Penn State, and, vice versa. Like, there's a nightmare tie scenario where it was like everybody's like 11-1. I don't think that happens. I think Ohio State is, excluding upsets, 10-2. Penn State's 11-1, and Michigan is going to be 12-0. That's how I see the East shaking out. I know. Go ahead. My bad.
Well, I guess I would just ask this then, because like what I guess I would be curious about is, right. So I mean, the power is in the East, right? I mean, there's no doubt. I think whatever happens in the West certainly is relevant in the Big Ten conversation. But since we're like pouring into week 1 and we do have less time to ask about some of the other questions, like, I guess where does that? Do you think any of these teams fit in the national scope, and in what way do they fit in the national scope if you do see a team? Because where I think Michigan has been well positioned, and I think it continues this year, is that they have a ton of depth on the offensive line. They're going to have a ton of guys that I think are ultimately going to be pros. they've been built to beat Ohio State. And then you have Penn State, who's been sitting there where like more skilled positions, and for whatever reason, they've been positioned well to battle well with, the Ohio State, but then again struggle against Michigan. So I guess like just where do you see like what the shakeout is between those three teams? Because there is definitely like a little three-card Monte going on between those three schools, and maybe what's the difference maker in terms of like what the big shakeout is? Because although I'm sure people are curious about the West, I do think the big games all happen in the East.
So a lot of that to me is where you're playing, right? So you're right. Penn State got walloped by Michigan. Penn State has really struggled to play on the road against Michigan. They've done pretty well against them at home, and Penn State has Michigan at home this year, and Ohio State on the road. They play Ohio State pretty much well wherever they're at. And then
Yep.
Ohio State is. Let me see. I have it written down here. Ohio State is on the road to Michigan. So I think
they're at Michigan,
yeah,
but 3 years in a row seems crazy, but they are there. Yeah.
I think if you look at what Michigan is going to do, they are just going to pound the ball down your throat. And the big question in theory of like elevation is like, can JJ McCarthy like step up and make the throws he needs to? And he showed that he could do that last year. The TCU game aside, like they I think they will beat Ohio State because of that defensive weakness. I think Ohio State might be able to keep up with them, but kind of like last year where it was like they just got run all over. I'd expect the same thing to happen. And like all the Penn State message boards, podcast, if you will, everybody's like, well, what are we going to do about the Michigan running game? And like a lot of people are like, we just got to hope that our defensive tackle group is better. And it's like, it should be. But that is the big question mark. So it's like, I would still expect Michigan to probably run over both teams. But I think Penn State has the edge on Ohio State based off of where they're playing. And I hope that they can keep it close against Michigan at home. It's not going to be a whiteout, though. This is a weird thing. Due to this whole new Big Ten contract thing, that is going to be the Fox kickoff at noon game, which, as much as I typically love the 12 o'clock kickoffs, it's not quite the same when the biggest game on your schedule at home is at noon, because you don't get liquored up enough to really make that place as rowdy as it could be.
Ultimate
Facts are facts.
factor. I love it, dude. Hey, really quick, I have a question for you. So obviously Michigan is like top dog, right? And then we look at, obviously kind of a bloodbath between Ohio State and Penn State. What I think the main differentiator will be the out of conference. What are some of the biggest out of conference games for those three teams?
Honestly, all three have really easy schedules, except for each other. There is a trap game for Michigan right before Ohio State, which is they're playing Maryland in Maryland. Not that Maryland is a crazy road game, but Talia Tagovailoa is the only experienced quarterback other than JJ McCarthy that they're really going to face this year. I don't think Maryland's going to be particularly good, but they almost did beat Michigan last year. They only won by 7. Granted, Michigan has a pretty bad defense. At least it was. You have Kevin Sumlin, by the way, is their new coordinator. But they have them right before Ohio State, so like that's kind of the tricky game for them. Penn State has a tricky game in the sense that they have Illinois, who actually has like a really good defensive line, and Brett Bielema, for however red his face gets and all those fun things we say about him, like he can coach a team. They did lose a lot of NFL talent, but like that's an 11 a.m. kickoff local time, which is just atrocious to try to wake up and play in Champaign, Illinois, at 11 a.m. on the road. But like schedule wise, all of these guys have really easy schedules. There's some trap games that kind of exist, specifically for Michigan, with the one good opponent before Ohio State if they all start kind of looking ahead to it. But Penn State plays UMass before Ohio State, and I think they play I think they play Northwestern before they play Michigan. So it's like Penn State kind of escapes
Murderer's
that.
row. I mean, it's
I know, right?
unbelievable, the scheduling. I mean, it's the Big Ten. I mean, I can't believe the schedules these guys have to play. I mean, to go to Northwestern and then to follow it up with something like, I mean, a
Trap game.
UMass. I mean, these are. I mean, this is why
Hey,
I will forever just contend that all these schools are just playing the same damn schedule. I'm honestly just picking on you a little bit, but do you think? I guess what I would ask too, and again, not to cut you off, because if you do want to get to the West, like I don't want to stop you from getting there. Um, but just because we're obviously it's basically us head and head with pardon my take. I'd really rather not talk about Wisconsin. It's basically us and Big Cat. So it's just like we're neck and neck right now. It's I don't. They're at whatever billion downloads and we're creeping up. So, I mean, it's hard to really talk about, but is there anybody from like just a quarterback standpoint that jumps out? Always comes down to quarterback play. I think that's like always like going to be something that's a differentiator. So, I know for your boys, it's going to be Drew Alar, although certainly in Allentown, I was hearing some good buzz about maybe some of the folks behind him. But is there anybody that jumps out and is there a difference maker? It seems like McCarthy would be the guy that has the most experience in the room and probably why Michigan probably is turning the most heads like going into the season. But I don't know, anybody that just jumps out to you in terms of like preseason camp and hear the buzz. And I know you're definitely a recruiting guy. So
Mordecai.
Tanner Mordecai is going to be a stud for Wisconsin. I don't know his exact stats off the top of my head, but he had like I think about 80 career touchdowns to like 20 interceptions, like a million yards for SMU. And if you look at like where Wisconsin has struggled, they specifically they've had great defense, they've had really crappy offense, and like so like that. Plus, they're in the West, so they have the easiest schedule of anybody, pretty much that you could have of like
This
the
year.
big six, big five. Yeah, right. So like he's gonna probably impress a lot of people who don't follow college football religiously. But honestly, like it's gonna come down to is Kyle McCord gonna be even close to as decent as the last three quarterbacks Ohio State has had? And is Drew Allard going to end up being that 5-star number one quarterback recruit that Penn State, in theory, signed? There was a bunch of like data around of these 5-star quarterbacks. What percent of them hit? What percent of them don't? And about 66% of them hit over the last I think it was 10 years that they like pulled the data on this. And the 1/3 that don't just play like your average starter, like your Sean Clifford, if you will. So like I think Drew Alar and Kyle McCord, you could say he's basically a 5-star. He was like right outside of that 5-star status. Like these guys should come in and really right off the bat be pretty good. Penn State's offensive line, I think, kind of helps give Drew Alar the foot up. But then again, their receivers are completely unknown versus Ohio State's receivers being this like absolute stud-filled room where everybody's a 5-star, and then the guy behind him is a 5-star, and the guy they just signed coming in is a 5-star. So it's going to be interesting, but like overall, like there's a lot less known. I think what's going to be really cool to see, honestly, is like what does McNamara do for Iowa? So I don't know if we ended up talking about it because I think it was kind of that dead period where I wasn't on the pod for a bit. But there's a very important race to 305. They have to score 305 points this year, or Brian Ferentz loses his job as offensive coordinator. So that is over the course of 12 games. I think it's 25-point average. I would expect that Cade McNamara should be a step up from where they've been. They don't really have playmakers. They don't have Sam Laporta anymore. They think their running back's good, but he's really not that good. Wisconsin has Braylon Allen, for example, to pair with Tanner Mordecai. So, like, he at least has NFL talent around him, where I don't know if Cade McNamara does, but, like, dude, we should just do, like, a countdown from 305 every week just to see how close we are to if he's got to drop 70 in week 12 to try to keep his job. It's going to be interesting. It should be an improvement in quarterback play, but there are less weapons than they had last year. So I don't really know what to expect from him.
Out of conference overs from Iowa? Are they going to try to run it up?
I'm on the
something
under
to look
week
at.
1. Definitely. Their defense is still going to be good.
already like no way anybody gets paid in Iowa on
Coward.
points. Ben's out.
No, they still have Cooper DeJean on defense for them. That's going to continue to Iowa will continue to
They are always
hold
good
people to
defensively.
no points. Question is, do they also hold themselves to no points? It'll be really interesting to see what happens.
Oh man, Iowa.
If you'll allow me to wax poetic on Penn State for a second,
I don't think we have a choice.
they should have three first. I know, but they realistically.
You're good. You're good. I'm playing with you. You're nice enough to come on. Talk about your Lions.
So I already said that they led the country in pressures, but a lot of people don't know the name of like that third defensive end in the rotation. Denied Dennis Sutton. He was a 5-star recruit out of Maryland. He's going to be a sophomore this year. Expect him to do huge things. Like they don't view him as like a bench player. They view him as like a co-starter, like that classic like or on the depth chart. But he's in theory potential first rounder. They should have 3 first rounders on this roster though, with Chop Robinson, Kalen King, and then Olu Fashanu, who's the best offensive tackle in a lot of people's minds in this draft class. So like when you got 3 first-round draft picks, unless you're like that Miami team who had all those guys and did absolutely nothing, you should in theory be pretty damn good. The only real holes that they have are not necessarily even receiver, but it's like they don't have a ton of known commodity at receiver besides Keandre Lambert-Smith. They got Dante Cephas from Kent State in the transfer portal. He did score 2 touchdowns against Georgia last year. So he's not a complete bum. That was a good secondary that he played there. But like they should be really, really well balanced. They don't know what they're going to get out of Drew Allar. They don't know if defensive tackle is going to be good enough to stop Michigan, and the receivers need to make plays whenever Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton don't have 300 rushing yards. I do expect them to do that week 1, take Penn State against the spread. West Virginia's defense is really bad, but like overall, like this team is the best chance they have to make some noise until next year, whenever Drew Allar in theory is a junior and about to be draft eligible. So I'm so pumped. Like this is the year. I've never been this excited. I can tell you guys that.
Are we thinking like potential natty? Like, are we going that far?
I have a future on it just because the odds are great, but I don't think they win it this year. I would be excited if they made it to the last 4-team playoff. Like that to me would be, I think, possible. If Michigan beats them, they kind of are just sitting there waiting for somebody to lose in conference championship week to slide up, and they slot in at like number 4. I could see that happening if they do go 11-1.
I can only imagine Ben Crownover watching a college playoff game with Penn State on his TV.
It's not fun. I'm usually pretty miserable, but I think I'm going to be optimistic this year and much better company to have.
Oh man, I've been in your house when Penn State is losing to Ohio State, and it's top-notch fandom right there. It's fun to watch.
Yeah. Yep, that's usually my saddest day of the year. So that until the next loss that they have.
Yeah, when they lose to Purdue.
I think, by the way, the only pick I didn't give out for a future that I do have is I have Indiana under 3.5. That's a plus 120. They're going to be really bad this year. Them and Northwestern are going to be horrible. Bet against them all year.
I do have one question for you. It's the Chase Byersdorf special. How do we feel about Nebraska? Are they back?
So this is going to be interesting because Matt Rule is not a shitty college coach. He's a shitty NFL coach. He did really well at Baylor. And like I said earlier, he did get the only good player off that Georgia Tech team. That like when watching that Clemson game, I'm like, man, if this guy had anybody around him, like they could have done something. Nebraska is already recruiting better with Matt Rule, and Matt Rule has Philly-based ties from his time at Temple. So, like, you'll probably notice, like, if you look at, like, 24/7 and, like, signing, like, letter of intent, all that crap, he's getting more guys out of Pennsylvania, which is a much better talent bed than Nebraska or kind of the flyover states, if you will. So, like, if he's able to recruit and win in those hotbeds of talent, Nebraska's talent level across the board should go up. And they did pretty well in the transfer portal. Like, people want to play for him. I don't know why, because he's like always like spitting on himself. It looks like, but he was really good at Baylor, and Nebraska is a better coaching job than Baylor. I think he can. I think he can do really well. It'll be he would really benefit if we weren't getting rid of divisions, because then he only has to beat Wisconsin and Iowa, and in theory Brett Bielema at Illinois. But without divisions, it's hard to say beyond this year. But I think they could make a little bit of noise. They've been bad for a while. I don't know if this QB elevates him that much, but Matt Rule is a good college coach, just not a good NFL coach.
They did lose to Northwestern last year, so you're right. It's tough sailing.
And I would say just a gentle reminder for those fans that are following along, Baylor's now basically a three-school coach in terms of dudes have won at the college football level, as to where Nebraska is going the total opposite direction, and they're probably a three-school coach and coaches that have not won. So, and that is like a good reminder, mostly to Chase, actually, about what it's like to go to the Big Ten. I don't think it's really a problem for anybody else, but if you're Chase, certainly, and again, Chase, so good to have you on, but those who aren't on every week don't always get the last laugh.
That's the way we keep it. All right. Well, hey, Ben Crownover, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming back, my dude. What great insight, like always. You're gonna have some sweet
Great to be back.
Sweet bets for us going forward. Ben's going to be joining us week over week as he can. Henny, you got any closing thoughts for him?
No, not for Ben in particular, other than just like thank you, of course, Ben, for coming on, and thank you for joining us. For those that just jumped into college football today, two things that just stood out to me. I mean, obviously, the Irish being in Ireland was certainly interesting, and we probably didn't pay enough attention to it, but it was certainly interesting. Rich Rod showing up in gray. He coaches in what is essentially the lesser of the Southeastern Conference. An interesting choice in August, so I just thought that was a bold move. Showing up in gray. I'm doing it here, but I'm in an air conditioned controlled home. I wouldn't take that risk, certainly outside all day. So I thought that was a bold choice. And New Mexico, I want to say New Mexico State, showing up in ponchos today. I don't even know what the end result of that game was, but rolling out in ponchos, love that. We're back in full uniform watch season.
They lost.
How did team show? They did lose. Okay, so it didn't work out. Yet, as I suspected, it would not. I don't remember the last time I was reporting a New Mexico or New Mexico State win, so figured that would likely go that way. But nonetheless, I appreciate the representation, and I like what you're doing there. You made the news today, and frankly, you normally do not.
The best part of the Notre Dame game, by the way, was not the game; it was the beer snake showing up again in Dublin. So
yeah, that's why I should say that it didn't get enough. Notre Dame gets plenty of attention. What didn't get enough attention is probably just a weirdly. I don't know. I just picture a lot of John Dugans walking down the street, frankly, to rolling into a football game, and how the Irish must cringe. I'm not sure. Cringe isn't maybe the right word, but I'm sure there was some uncomfortability in the acceptance that college football had rolled into their lovely towns.
let me tell you, when I was there, my tour guide did tell me I looked very Irish. So your deduction is correct. And two, they love Notre Dame over there. Like, it is everywhere. Like, Irish, fighting Irish, blah, blah, blah. So they love it. It's probably the only American football they do watch. So good for them.
So they have NBC, is what I'm hearing. They have NBC.
They apparently do. And
Peacock, yeah.
It's a Catholic university.
Yeah,
so,
there you go.
They love it over there. All right, boys. Well, good episode. I am so freaking pumped that college football is back. I know both of you are. And until next week, we'll have a little bit more to talk through with week one, some results there. And then Ben will bring us his week two pick'ems. Those will be back. Until then, I hope everybody has a great weekend. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and call Henny a moron. And follow us on TikTok, Instagram. We're at almost about 1,300 followers on Instagram. So keep it going there. Facebook, all of it. And then leave us a comment, a rating, share the episode with a friend. We love the growth that we've seen the last year. So enjoy your weekend. Be safe. And we'll talk to you later. Bye.